VikesNow, I am Dustin Baker. We are 11 days away from the Vikings regular season, and accordingly, we had roster cuts to 53 players, which a lot of disclaimers is that it's not going to remain that exact 53. A lot of shit can happen between now and these 11 days, whether it's injury or just flat out free agent move. And I'm here with Josh Frey, who's going to walk through 5 or 6 surprises about the Vikings roster trim down. Foremost, how are you?
I'm doing good, man. Glad that we finally got at least our initial 53-man roster in the books. Now we kind of have some sort of semblance of where this team's going for 2023. And yeah, it's just an exciting time.
Yeah, it was. Yesterday is a whirlwind, especially if you do this for a living like Josh and I do, because you're just waiting. You don't know if they're going to say, all right, the roster's ready at 1:30, or if they're going to take it down to the wire. And I think they finally revealed it at 3:30. But what we didn't necessarily foresee when we went to bed last night, or what we wake up to this morning, kind sir, is Myles Gaskin, a running back from the Dolphins, is now a Viking. And to make room for him, Jalen Reagor, who allegedly was being shopped yesterday, was waived. So we'll start with that. Give us both takes. Gaskin in, Reagor out. What you think?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely see why they'd add a guy like Myles Gaskin to the team. I mean, first and foremost, they don't have, other than Alexander Madison, they don't have a guy in that running back room before the Gaskin signing that had 10 carries last season. So, I mean, it makes sense to add another veteran presence there in case one of Madison or Chandler gets hurt. He can step into that RB2 kind of role. I do think that Madison and Chandler are the bona fide top two running backs on this roster right now, but any extra depth at that position, especially a position that tends to get hurt on a pretty regular basis in the NFL, I think that's a decent move. Plus, I mean, his pass catching ability, he in Miami, I don't know how much he's going to do this in Minnesota with their wide receiver talent, but he had the ability to step out into the slot or even as a boundary receiver at times. So adding him with the pass catching prowess that he does have, I think that overall this is a really solid move for the Vikings. And as for Reagor, I mean, hopefully somebody claims him so they don't have to eat that 2.42 million in cap. But at the end of the day, say what you will about the trade that they made last summer. Honestly, I can't be too upset about it considering they're only giving up a 7th and a 5th round pick. And it's a flyer on a former 1st round pick who had very apparent upside in terms of athleticism, and it just hasn't panned out. So can't be too mad about either move.
And there's 2 things of context on Reagor's deal. So the 5th rounder, conditional 5th, that was shipped to Philadelphia, that was kind of gained back by the Vikings when they traded with the Chiefs in the draft. They traded out of the 4th, well, they traded down in the 4th round to draft Jay Ward, a safety, and part of the compensation was they got an extra 5th rounder next year. So in my mind, I think in Kwesi's mind too, he hedged the bet against Reagor. And the other part of this is whether it's a trade for Reagor or trading away Vidarian Lowe, you have to look at it from Kwesi's perspective. And both sides of this can be savaged or applauded. Do you just stubbornly cling to your guys because those are the guys you picked and say, well, damn it, I'm going to make them work? Or do you get credit for knowing that, all right, this hasn't worked, I'm going to try something different and move on? Both of those ideas can be like, you can commend him or savage him either way. But I think the sunken cost fallacy where it's like, yeah, just because you did something right or wrong a year ago doesn't mean you can't adapt and change. I think we saw that in living color with his just saying sayonara to Reagor, or some of the stuff we're about to talk about with roster cuts or the Vidarian Lowe trade. And then on Gaskin, yeah, he was at the peak of his powers, at least so far in 2020. You might remember from fantasy football, he showed up out of nowhere in the middle of the season and was kind of a guy you can plug and play for or PPR for receptions and whatnot. So yeah, I'm right there with you that they've proven now through 2 seasons they don't like to use Kane Wangu on offense. And so if you're going to keep him around, great. And if you want to use him, even better. But in the meantime, running backs do get hurt, and you got to have somebody like Myles Gaskin, who's certainly more experienced than Aaron Dykes or Abram Smith. But no further ado, let's get into the surprises after covering this Gaskin and Reagor stuff. I don't know if you wanted to rank them or if you just want to start rapid fire, but give me the first thing that surprised you, jumped off the page about this 53-man roster.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing that comes to mind happened on Sunday night when they traded Vidarian Lowe. I mean, at least for my money, it felt like he won that backup offensive tackle battle against Ali Udo. And I know we can go back to last year and he had a pretty decent season at that tackle spot following his 2021 debacle at guard where you got benched and had all those penalties early in the year. So I mean, honestly, I mean, either one I don't think would have been a bad route. But in terms of this preseason alone, I really thought that Vidarian Lowe played super well in those preseason games. It looked like he played well in camp as well. So the fact that they went with Udo, a 2019 draft pick, who Kwesi didn't really have much connection to, rather than that 2022 pick and Vidarian Lowe, it feels like that was a bit of a surprise, at least for me, especially after Udo had that second preseason game, or was it the third one? I don't even remember
Second
anymore.
one.
Yeah, second one where he had those 2 penalties, allowed the sacks, and yeah, it just didn't seem like he was adapting too well to that second team offensive line. And hopefully at the end of the day, it just doesn't matter with Christian Darrisaw and Brian O'Neill on the roster still. So hopefully we don't even have to talk about this once October rolls around. But it was just the first surprise in my book.
The first Kwesi draft pick out the door via trade or cut. That was Vidarian Lowe. And then, I just kind of, I hope that Vidarian gets a chance to play in New England. And he told me and Bryant McKinney about 15 months ago that he grew up cheering for the Patriots. So it's kind of cool that he'll have a puncher's chance to get some playing time there. And I think there's one thing we can learn, and it's hard to remember, I swear to God, about the preseason, is sometimes, like in Uli Udo's example, like it doesn't matter one iota if you have a shitty game. Or like Albert Wilson last year, 2 touchdowns, doesn't matter, cut the next couple of days. Luigi Villain, arguably the defensive MVP for the preseason Vikings, waived, hopefully back on the practice squad. Now, with like Najee Thompson, it certainly mattered because he did the thing on special teams, but I'm going to try to remind folks and remind myself that if a guy balls out in the preseason, it really doesn't matter. Or if he sucks and has penalties, for some reason, it really doesn't matter. It's really, really weird. Do you agree?
Yeah, I mean, I think that especially nowadays with the joint practices, I think teams are taking that much more into account than preseason games where the starters are getting reps in those joint practices, whereas a lot of times in preseason games, it's second and third stringers out there the entire time. So even if a guy is a quality, like borderline starter at the NFL level, if he's out there with third string backups that really don't know what they're doing, he's probably not going to look good regardless. So I think if Udo showed some things in those joint practices against the Titans and Cardinals, then that this is probably the right direction for them. And plus, he's a veteran. He has experience at all these spots on the offensive line. So yeah, I'm not going to be too upset about it. It was just a little bit of a surprise on my part.
It certainly was. And Udo remember last year looked great when Darrisaw was concussed and O'Neill had the partial tear of his, was it Achilles? Yeah. And so I get it that, not a good look in a second preseason game to play for, but I remember tweeting or thinking or writing or all of them that there wasn't a noticeable downgrade from Udo in those games. And I'm like, how did we get so lucky here? So we'll hope that continues if indeed he plays at all in the stead of O'Neill or Darrisaw. T.Y. McGill is another example of preseason last year. All of us had him make a 33-man roster, unceremonious cut, joined the 49ers. What is your next surprise after Vidarian Lowe shipped to the AFC East?
I think I got to go over to that cornerback spot next with the Johan Williams cut. And I predicted that they'd keep Najee Thompson around, but the fact that they're keeping him and he's the 5th quarterback rather than the 6th cornerback is a little surprising in my book, just because Johan Williams was like the one guy outside of Byron Murphy that really has a bit of NFL experience. Like Caleb Evans played 10 games last year. Andrew Booth played 6. And then you've got Mekhi Blackman and Najee Thompson, who haven't played a lick of NFL football yet. So this cornerback depth it's looking a little shaky right now. And I mean, Eric Eager actually brought up this point on the
great Eric Eager.
The great Eric Eager brought this up on the Vikings Happy Hour podcast last night, where the Kansas City Chiefs rolled into the AFC Championship game and they had 3 rookie cornerbacks playing by the end of the game against Jamar Chase, Tyler Boyd, and T. Higgins. Man. So there is a world where this sort of thing can work out, but Brian Flores is going to have to be on his A game if they don't go out and add another veteran. And with Desmond King already off the market, it's looking thin really quickly here.
It is. And I'm going to tell you a little story, Josh, and you'll remember this in living color. The reason we figured out that Duke Shelley was a baller last year is because Cameron Dantzler was hurt. Andrew Booth was hurt. Caleb Evans was hurt. So it's not weird at all that something could happen to Byron Murphy for a couple of weeks. Caleb Evans could get hurt for a couple of weeks. Oh, Blackman's got a hamstring. And then you're staring at the depth chart going, oh boy. Najee Thompson, maybe like Tay Gowan from the practice. I mean, you have virtually nothing. So we're right back where we were in March or so when we weren't sure if Duke Shelley was coming back, and then he didn't. Staring at the depth chart, going Byron Murphy, and that's it. That's where we're at right now. So we have this great hopeful maybe that Blackman's going to be a stud, and Booth's going to have a renaissance, and Evans has got a good helmet. So it should cause apprehension. But to what our friend Eric Eager said, that gives me a little bit of solace.
Yeah, and I also keep in mind with Najee Thompson, this is a guy that played wide receiver in college. So the cornerback position is brand new to him. It is brand spanking new. He played wide receiver for his first couple of years, and then he switched over to solely special teams. He hasn't played a lick of defense. Even in preseason, he was pretty much exclusively a special teams guy. So even if somebody gets hurt, we can't really rely on him to be the guy. Oh, hey, you're going to go guard like DeAndre Hopkins or something in a couple of weeks. Be ready for it.
It doesn't It doesn't even sound like he would get in at cornerback, by the way you described him. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think he'd have a better chance at going and playing wide receiver than he would at cornerback at this point. But
that would be fun.
Yeah. I mean, kudos to him, though. I mean, he was absolutely spectacular on the special teams, and 3 UDFAs on the roster again this year. That was the next surprise, honestly, I think for both of us, was the fact that they were able to keep 3 UDFAs on this roster. But yeah, it just speaks to Kwesi Adofo-Mensah's acumen, especially late in drafts and in that UDFA market, to go get these guys. Like last year, he brought in Kyrus Tonga, he got Duke Shelley later in the year, and he added Ryan Wright, who turned into the best punter in the entire league. So it's just super surprising, and it's great to see Kwesi be able to use a scouting talent to his advantage.
It's the Miami Heatization of the Vikings. If you watched the NBA playoffs at all last year, for half of a second, you heard about all of the undrafted dudes that they employed and made a marvelous run. So cornerbacks, if indeed that this is not it, because they basically have 4. If we're going to put Najee in that box as a special teams guy only, which is fine with us, free agency, Bradley Roby, William Jackson, Greedy Williams. I don't know if they bring Dantzler back. Shelley is
Duke
available.
Shelley, yeah.
Yep, Duke Shelley's back. Yeah, so maybe we could have a kumbaya. The big stud, Desmond King, in terms of free agent cornerbacks, he's off the board. He went to go play with Patrick Peterson and Chandon Sullivan and Mike Tomlin with the Steelers. So it seems like we've been doing this all offseason. We go look at the cornerback free agent wire and be like, oh, this dude would be nice. And then boom. I remember, was it Shaquille Griffin about 4 months ago? Yep. No, he's gone. So we're in a very familiar spot. And then the 3 UDFAs. It's a weird paradox that we have, that we're not afraid at all, some of us, to savage Kwesi Adofo-Mensah for Andrew Booth isn't making a big breakout. But then if you start to say, well, what about this Ivan Pace emergence? What about Najee making the depth chart? It's like UDFAs don't count when you're talking about a draft class, which I don't quite get.
Yeah, I mean, Ivan Pace, you can't say enough about what he's done over the summer. He was basically the star linebacker. Like, he had the green dot on his helmet throughout all the preseason, and he didn't even play in that last preseason game because his roster spot was so secure. And Kevin O'Connell's out here talking about, yeah, you made the roster, now you're just playing to get a starting spot or something. Like, it's just crazy what he's been able to do over the past couple weeks and months for the Vikings. And yeah, I'm excited to see what he can do. Andre Carter, I think he didn't have the greatest summer in the world, but with his upside, I think that it was warranted to keep him around, just because I think that some teams are going to be looking at him if he went onto the waiver wire, and they're going to be like, this guy, he's got all the measurables. He had the production at Army, and we might as well take a flyer on him. So I think keeping him, it was a little bit of a surprise to see him kept over Luigi Villain. But at the end of the day, I think I was 50-50 on both of those guys, especially when Villain was playing in the fourth quarter against the Cardinals last weekend. So yeah, I think it could have gone either way there.
Yeah, I don't think they wanted Carter to hit the waiver wire because somebody would have. I think is the rule right now that you have to put him on the 53 man.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, I think they were probably paranoid about that, whereas Luigi might have a better shot to fly under the radar. We shall see. So I guess number 3, I don't know if we'll have 6 now. We'll see what your list says, is the mere fact that there are 3 rookie UDFAs on this roster. Almost feels like fruition rather than a surprise based on what we've watched this summer. What is your next one?
Yeah, I think just keeping those six safeties on the roster is just what are they going to do with all of them? Because they all have really intriguing talent. Like obviously Harrison Smith, Cam Bynum, those guys are going to probably be starters for most of the season unless injuries strike. But Josh Metellus, Jay Ward, Lewis Cine, and even Theo Jackson, I think had a pretty decent summer this year. So Metellus and Ward, I think they can pretty much play anywhere in the secondary. We've talked about Ward basically ever since he got drafted. He's played outside corner, he's played in the slot, he's played in the box, he's played free safety. He can do pretty much everything. So it's just going to be interesting to see what Brian Flores does to utilize all of these different guys, and maybe Jackson goes over to special teams too. But yeah, it was a little bit surprising to see because you don't really see an NFL team with five cornerbacks, six safeties, and technically only four cornerbacks. It's usually the other way around. So that was a little bit strange to see, but I'm here for it.
I was on a brief radio appearance on a southern Minnesota radio station this morning, and I told them about the safeties. It would be excessive if they kept five safeties, and here I am telling you guys that they're keeping six. So my fringe theory here is that perhaps they will view Josh Metellus or Jay Ward as a frequent slot cornerback, and then that way they can kick Mekhi Blackman out to the outside or something like that, because or unless they just have linebacker like vibes for a couple of these dudes like Cine. It will be probably the most fascinating thing to see on X's and O's against the Buccaneers is what are we going to do with all these guys? We really like all of the caliber of players, but it's so strange to have a secondary that big, that young, and for after last year's shenanigans, with the bend but don't break, what's the difference going to be? All of that, plus Brian Flores being new in general, his first time as a defensive coordinator with that title anyhow. I'm right there with you that it's going to be fascinating, and it is surprising they kept six. I think to Kevin Seifert's testament on ESPN, he predicted they'd keep all six, and he was correct. So nice prognostication there. We got one or two left from you for surprises.
We got one more, and
right.
I think I'm going back to the offensive line, and just the fact that they only kept 8 guys at that spot. Obviously Blake Brandel has pretty much turned into the guy that can play pretty much any position, with him being at guard throughout training camp, but having the acumen to play tackle basically throughout his entire NFL career. He's another guy like when Brian O'Neill went out, like you didn't notice much of a difference when he was in. It's kind of the same thing with Ali Udo and Christian Darrisaw over there. So I think that he's going to be kind of a swing guy that can play pretty much all four positions for you. And hopefully Chris Reed is able to come back soon and get back onto this roster. But I think that this is another area between interior offensive line and cornerback. If they make a waiver claim here in the next couple minutes, or they go out and get a guy in free agency, I think those are the two positions that I'm looking out for the most.
One thing that causes me some anguish is, how we talked about, pull up Spot Rack and go look at the free agent corners like Greedy Williams, or let's go look at the running backs. There's Kareem Hunt. When you do that for offensive tackle, it's like a bunch of nothings. I haven't looked at it since yesterday, so maybe now there's some fortification of guys who are recently released, but usually tackles are a hot commodity. So coupled with the Vidarian Lowe trade, and then getting rid of all of the depth, Christian DeLauro, no thanks. Jerry Williams, no thanks. I don't even know if those guys are good, but you'd think you'd have one human body that can play offensive tackle in a pinch. And this reminds me of Bryant McKinney. When I do my show with him on Wednesday nights, he always talks about how rarely he even had a backup, because they always said him playing hurt is better than the backup. It's like, all right, well, I guess Darrisaw and O'Neill are there in terms of their reputation. So the offensive line, it's a weird spot for me, because last year, even though it wasn't great, I still swear it was improved to my eye test. PFF,
100%.
PFF ended up saying they were like the 13th best unit in football. And then in those moments where Darrisaw was out or Garrett Bradbury had his back, Brian O'Neill at the end, the guys that they plugged and played for the fourth time on the show, they played well. And we're not used to that. During the Zimmer era, some dickhead would come in and we'd be like, oh God, and this guy used to play guard. Now he's playing center. But by the way, he's also going to play tackle in the fourth quarter. That's an exaggeration. But when they would do that versatility stuff, it always end up in Cousins under siege, Bradford under siege. But last year we got to see like a little different story. Like, wow, Blake Brandel can come in and do the thing. It felt like this is why we hired an offense first head coach. We don't have to just think it goes to the depths of hell when an offensive lineman goes down.
Yeah,
yeah, go ahead.
honestly, it still feels like they still have all this versatility. Like we talked about Brandell a couple of minutes ago, but then Ezra Cleveland played tackle all throughout college, switched
Yeah.
over to guard, and I think he could, even if it's in a pinch, I think he could swap out to that left tackle spot and probably be just fine considering all the reps that he got at Boise State over those 4 years. So yeah, they've still kept the versatility, and that's kind of why it's probably okay that they only have 8 guys across the 5 positions or whatever.
Mhm.
But I'd still like to see at least one more guy, and maybe it's just Chris Reed coming back healthy at week 5, and hopefully they can hold up before then. But yeah, I'm a little bit wary of it. Hopefully it works out.
I got two more things to ask you aside from
Yeah.
roster surprises. It's awesome that they kept Nick Muse because that means we don't have to lose him. He looked so good. But where does he fit on the offense?
I don't know if he's going to get a ton of reps, especially early on, just
Okay.
because they've got TJ Hawkinson, they've got Josh Oliver, they've got Johnny Munt, the best tight end 3 in the entire NFL, which but I do think that Hawkinson has a history of getting hurt. Josh Oliver had injury history during the early
Okay.
portion of his career in Jacksonville. So if one of those guys, or God forbid, both of them went down, I think he's just a security blanket in case an injury were to happen.
Let's say this season didn't quite have Kirk attached, Justin Jefferson. Let's say we were looking at a season that was like, well, this team is rebuilding and they're going to be about 6-11. I don't think that many of us would bitch about Nick Muse getting a lot of targets as like a TE1 or TE2. That's how good he looked in the preseason. I'm just curious, does he actually see the field? Is there special teams move? But I do like your explanation. The final thing I had for you is not Vikings related. Allegedly, the mystery team inside the Jonathan Taylor sweepstakes was the Green Bay Packers. Why, in theory, would they add Jonathan Taylor to a running back room with Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon when you're supposed to, per analytics, start reducing the importance of running backs?
So I think Aaron Jones by himself is one of the best running backs in the entire NFL when he's healthy. I think that's been a little bit of an issue over the past couple of years, though. And then A.J. Dillon, for my money, it feels like he's one of the most overhyped players in the entire league. If I'm being completely honest,
Okay.
he's got the look of like this guy that can just bowl over defenders. But I feel like over his first few years in the NFL, we just haven't seen him do that a ton. He's gotten goal line reps for Green Bay, and he's been decent in those. But I just don't think he's lived up to that potential. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like one or both of those contracts are coming up here pretty soon. At some point.
Yeah, let's see, because Dalvin's and Aaron Jones were exactly linked. I think both of them are coming up because A.J. Dillon's rookie deal was that 20. Was that the Aaron Rod? Was that the draft that got Love?
I believe so. So yeah,
so
this
that's
would be
got
the
one coming
last.
up. Yeah, so they both might be in flux. But then if I don't even know if it's still alive, but if they got Taylor, so then you're going to pay him 12 million per season. I guess it may be planning for the future. And then, I mean, of course, we wouldn't want to see Taylor twice a year. I mean,
Right, yeah.
it's not a complete insult that they're exploring this. It's just weird that, like, if they just had A.J. Dillon, then it makes sense. All right, yeah, they're going out to get richer. But I don't know how you would give targets to, or carries and touches to that many guys. I don't know.
I don't see it happening just because, like you said, they've got those 2 guys over there already, and they're probably going to be passing the ball quite a bit with all the talent that they've got at the wide receiver spot too. Even if it's just the dump off to Christian Watson and let him run for a bit, I think Jordan Love's going to be capable of doing that sort of thing. But yeah, I think Jonathan Taylor is a long shot just in case something weird happens with one of their RBs over the next few weeks. But I really hope that we don't have to see him twice a year because that would suck.
So you're an elite draft mind, also an elite fantasy mind. Now that we know Jonathan Taylor is going to be gone for at least 4 weeks, and on top of the mystery in general, what round can PPR redrafters get him tonight or this weekend in their fantasy draft?
Oh man, this is a tough one to put on the spot. I'd say probably I might target him like 6th round, but I don't know if I'd go earlier than that just because you're only getting 3/4 of a season out of him, and he's not much of a pass catching presence to begin with. So in terms of like true PPR too, I think you can get other running backs that are going to be able to produce more.
Yeah, in let's see, a $25 league, so one of my least expensive ones, I got him in round 4 before the expirations, and so now I got to limp through with some backups and just hope that he eventually plays somewhere. All right, Josh, great episode, sir. Let's see. Next week when we chat, we'll be previewing week 1, Vikings Buccaneers. I can't believe
Can't
we've
wait.
made it.
Can't wait.
Absolutely. All right, man. 1 week from today, you and I have got a date to talk about that and go through things you'll be looking for. All right.
Sounds great, man. See you
All
then.
right. Take it easy.